little bit of background on this. One of my close colleagues, Dr. Paul Davis, is the one who runs this. He's the president and CEO of First Responder Institute that puts on the Firefighter Combat Challenge. It's a worldwide competition, kind of a fitness competition for firefighters, and one that I've participated in unofficially. I always show my students that video in my strength and conditioning class when we're talking about training specificity and stuff, and they get a kick out of it, probably because the announcer is a little, that's talking in the background, some mentions of LSD and something or another. Anyways, so this competition is actually going to be at ACSM. It's going to be set up in front of the conference hotel, and my colleague's very entrepreneurial in nature. And he's going to have university-based competitions, so technically we could run relays from UK if we had 4 people to run through it. It's kind of a neat thing. We'll kind of see how it goes over. But Dr. Davis gave me a call 14 years ago when I was in my first year here, and he was basically, now looking back on it, my perspective is he was looking for a naive junior faculty member to write a FEMA grant for $1 million. And he's like, "Are you interested?" I said, "Okay." So we didn't get funded, unfortunately, but it was a good experience, and that one phone call is what put me down this trajectory of kind of tactical strength and conditioning and stuff. I was a firefighter coming out of high school, so there was certainly that passion and stuff that I still have today. But anyways, this isn't about me. This is about him.
Good setup.
And it is, but yeah, and we'll have a symposium at ACSM on firefighter occupational performance, and so if you guys can make it Friday, it's Friday afternoon one, probably have better things to do at that point, about 4:30, but you're more than welcome to come and stuff. So, so Ansi's going to be presenting some of the data from the World Championships that were in Louisville in 2017, fall 2017.
Trying to think about it.
It's been a little while now, time flies, but again, it's the World Championships happened to come to Louisville. So, I mean, they've been in Germany and all over the world, but they were here, and so we had a very unique opportunity with Dr. Davis to collect some data and see some of the best tactical athletes in the world perform and get some data on them. So he'll be sharing that with us today. Ansi.
Thank you. That was a good setup for this. So I'm showing what we did was we went to the, I'll tell you more specifically about the methods. The thing I want to clarify in the beginning is the sample we had for this study was not the general firefighter population. These were the 1%ers in terms of physical fitness. So just keep that in mind. And I'll try to illustrate some points about that and how we were able to a little bit separate them from the general firefighter community. The title's kind of generic, significant findings for Firefighter Combat Challenge. We did end up, based off what findings we had, was we narrowed it down a little bit more on the difference of age on our measures. But I'll get more into that. So we'll go through introduction of the study and methods of data collection and then results, and then discuss those results and have some sort of conclusions about it. So just first of all, just kind of describe how physical fitness relates to occupational and physical performance in firefighters. Well, if you see here, I kind of listed out lower body power, upper body strength and endurance, lower body endurance, anaerobic endurance capacities, also capabilities are related to performance. So basically, when you're looking at a firefighter, what he needs is everything. They need to be well-rounded athletes if they want to perform at a high capacity in terms of physical performance. So in terms of age, when I was looking at some of the research, there's not a ton in terms of what older and younger firefighters have to do in their occupation, but I found this one study which was on Finnish firefighters, that they have to perform essentially the same task throughout their career. So whether they're young or old, they're still going to be going on the fire ground and performing strenuous tasks over there. What we also know is that there's decrements in physical fitness, and also when specifically firefighter performance or fireground performance has been measured, the older firefighters tend to perform worse than their younger counterparts. So for example, here if we're looking at this cardiorespiratory fitness, there's a couple of things to look at in this graph. So these are all firefighters, and they're looking at cardiovascular fitness in terms of metabolic equivalence. So the first thing to look at here is the age groups. That's what these represent here. So one is 18 to 29, and the 6 is 50 to 50 years old. So we can see that all of these lines represent the cardiovascular endurance or cardiovascular fitness. So it always tends to decline. But the second thing to look at here is if we're looking when this cohort was separated into people who had, or firefighters who had low BMI and exercised less or exercised more, or had lower BMI and exercised more or less. The BMI, when there's a lower BMI, there's always a better performance, and when they participated in physical activity more than 150 minutes per week, they tended to always have higher performance. So if you're looking at, for example, a low BMI, high physical activity, they, at the oldest age group, they were still at significantly higher cardiorespiratory fitness compared to the youngest group who were over 30 BMI and participated in physical activity less than 150 minutes per week. There's not a ton of information on effects of physical activity in strength, but from age we can see from here that if this is a Finnish study, again, which was in Finnish, so lucky enough I was able to actually read it. If I give the reference, you might have a tough time getting into the details of it. Sometimes it helps to be bilingual. Anyways, so physical activity wasn't really looked at, but what we saw was in 3 different age cohorts, there tended to be a decline in squat performance. Interestingly, when that same group was looked at over 3 years and then 13 years, there wasn't a significant difference really. And in this older group, it seemed like they were actually improving their performance. So maybe it was that in the beginning, the firefighters were not as physically active, but later on they might have been. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. Anyways, so also what we know is when firefighters are engaging in physical activity, they seem to have a attenuated decline in cardiorespiratory fitness. So that we already kind of saw from the graph. But also in that cohort that I just showed you, they were looking at VO2 peak, and they saw that when the initial VO2 peak was adjusted for an age, the weekly frequency of exercise predicted VO2 peak after 13 years. So physical fitness tends to have some sort of an effect. But currently we don't really know, we know these from fitness parameters, but we don't really know the effects of physical activity on occupational performance. So there wasn't really any information on that. And specifically, if we're looking at is the decline in age or decline in performance related to just physiological properties, or is it just behavioral? Because anecdotally, I heard from some of the firefighters saying that they might be slower because they're older, because they don't have time to train as much. So we don't really know. Right now, it was just anecdotal evidence. So going into a little bit of a different topic that led to our secondary question, that we saw that there's not a ton of information about this either, but we know that some tasks that firefighters have to engage in are, when asking the firefighter's perspective on this, they say that, for example, a smoke diving task, they perceive that aerobic system is more tasks than strength and coordination biomotor abilities. Whereas when you're looking at clearing debris, which are more static exertion or being stationary, that requires more muscular strength, and somewhere where they have to perform activities on the roof that requires more coordination. But beyond that, we don't really know how firefighters themselves perceive what they think the biomotor abilities are that they need most in their occupation. So going into the age question, our primary purpose was to evaluate the influence of age on occupational physical performance, and then also on physical training habits in male structural firefighters. And I should specify here that we're looking at a top-level competitors or top-level firefighters in terms of physical ability. So we hypothesized in the beginning that older firefighters would demonstrate reduced occupational performance, and also they would report lower training volume and stress. The secondary purpose was to evaluate what they perceived as the most important biomotor abilities to perform their occupational tasks, not just the competition, but firefighting in general. What they think that is what are the most needed biomotor abilities, and we hypothesized that greater value would be placed in endurance-related biomotor abilities for all firefighter cohorts, just based off what fitness seemed to be more, or cardiorespiratory fitness and endurance seemed to be a greater predictor of occupational performance when we looked at these cross-sectional data before. So as far as methods, this was a cross-sectional design where we also did group comparisons between older and younger individuals. So mainly the independent variable was age, and our dependent variables were the time it took to complete the simulated fireground test, and then also the training questionnaire variables. So the subjects this is kind of a hard time recruiting and getting all the information from everyone, because their primary purpose in the competition really was to compete. They weren't there to participate in the research study. But that said, we were able to get questionnaires from 64 firefighters and their competition times. And then we had a subsample of 12 subjects who we were able to get physical data and also their physiological and subjective responses to the actual fireground task. And we kind of extrapolated conclusions from that. So the actual simulated fireground test was in personal protective equipment and SCBA, and there's 5 different tasks: for high-rise pack carrier, hose hoist, forcible entry, hose advance, and written rescue. And instead of describing it, I thought I'll show you a video of an individual performing it.
I shot this with his phone. We'll see if the
She said yes.
amateur video.
I think you need to do that. Let's in a public place.
Tell you what, these firefighter brothers, man, they can be rough on each other. We can be rough. That girl had said no.
50 pounds a year plus probably a 35 or 40 pound high-rise pack on her shoulder.
Team Punch, Elkhart City Fire Department. We got Martin,
This is what you'll see at ACSM.
Jacob, and Matthew
You can
Swear.
compete in it. Yeah, we do first in line. Huh? I think so, yeah.
Coming down good.
So they basically took a brief break and ran him through this in the middle of the world competition. It was pretty cool.
All right, for those of you who've been helping out, this is
Did everyone waiting over there? All the competitors?
we've been helping out here
Oh, what's going on?
Kentucky, and they're studying. This guy watched this so much all week long.
It's a former world champion right behind him from Mankato, Minnesota, the guy in the black. That shirt is coaching him up. standing there with his phone.
Yeah, I guess I want to post on that one. All right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, having that year on and with the SCBA is definitely adds a different component to performing those tasks. I was really glad to be able to actually do it, to feel what it feels like to be doing those type of tasks. And I can't really even imagine what it feels like when you actually have to save people and you're in a burning building trying to do stuff like that, and there's actual, you know, lives at stake. So, you know, that gave me even more respect to firefighters doing what they do.
And honestly, if I might add, the world record is just under, what, 90 seconds? You ran it in 2:38, so about
Yeah,
a
it was
minute
like
faster.
a minute 15 seconds.
Yeah,
So they're like sprinting through.
That's amazing.
Wow.
So
Can we see that video?
Yeah, it won't take long. You're done.
I had it, but the way they were filming it, I kind of got nauseous doing it, because they had like 20 different camera angles. They were trying to be the, I don't know, Hollywood film directors. So I decided not to do it. Thought it was a little bit funnier anyways. Anyways, so what we did with the subsamples is we took their height, body mass, body composition, and girth measurements, and then also heart rate during the task, and then what lactate pre and post. And then with the questionnaires, with our main outcomes, we're looking at cardiovascular and strength training. So we asked them questions of what their typical session RPE was, or rating of perceived exertion, and their typical session duration, and we multiplied those two to get a typical training stress variable. And then for cardiovascular strength volume, for cardio volume, we took the typical frequency and typical session duration. And for strength training, we took the workout frequency, exercise, and then sets. I think we didn't put repetitions for that because we thought that, you know, making someone do something for 10 repetitions versus 5 repetitions, that would change the variable quite a bit, but it could, you know, it's just doing something with 5 repetitions, it would increase the volume or the intensity of the exercise. So we decided to leave it out. Other training variables we used were types of exercise, periodization strategies, and also the importance of flex bimotor abilities to answer our secondary question. In terms of the statistical analysis, we did central tendencies, and then mean, median, mode, dispersion, and then median age we found to be 37 years old. So we basically cut the sample size from there, and then put them into younger or older groups from there. And then we did independent sample seed test for the questionnaires and all the physical measurements and responses to the similar 5-gram test, and then also correlation analysis with age. And then contingency table was to look at significant differences when they were looking at frequencies of someone answering yes or no to questions. So in terms of results, this is just to show that we did get a 3D representative sample in terms of their performance. So this is during the wild card round of all the competitors' meet time, and then in our research study, we got pretty close to what that time was. The only people we didn't get, the standard deviation was pretty close as well, but we didn't get all the slowest competitors. So in that sense, it was a little bit different. In terms of physical characteristics, when we compared old and young, age was different. So younger were about 32 years old, older were about 45 years old as far as mean goes. And the only thing that was really different was body fat percentage that we saw. The group sizes were a little bit different, but we did see statistical significance between the groups in that sense. As far as responses to the similar 5-gram test, there's no differences really or anything. The only thing that was close was RPE in the beginning, but we didn't really find that very meaningful. As far as the performance time, there was a significant difference between older and younger groups. It's only about 10 seconds. We found it significant still, but for example, if I ran it in 2 minutes and 40 seconds, these were still under a minute or under 2 minutes, so it's still very fast time for them. And we found that age was associated with simulated 5-gram test time. So again, it did seem to, it was associated, but the R value wasn't great, so that necessarily wasn't the greatest. Or if we're looking at firefighter cohorts in, or population in general, age is, I wouldn't say that age necessarily is the greatest predictor. If we're adding physical activity into the mix as well, that would probably be a greater predictor. So as far as training stress and volume, there's no real significant difference at all between younger and older groups. If anything, the older cohort, they had a little bit higher training stress and resistance training, and well, this is really small. Something to note here as well is there's a lot of variability in training stress between the populations. But as far as age goes, it didn't really seem to serve any sort of importance. So that anecdotal proposition that was said to me by some of the older firefighters that didn't have time, that didn't seem to be the case. So in terms of perceived biomotor abilities, what is thought to be important, there was no difference between the age groups. But I listed these out, and basically they were asked about these in terms of put a value from between 1 and 5 in terms of what you think is important. And what we saw here was all 3 endurance related biomotor abilities were placed at the top 3. So what we kind of took from there is that they perceive endurance to be one of the key variables for performing occupational tasks. Some other things here to note. So we didn't really see many difference between old and younger groups except for self-designed workouts. So older firefighters seem to have a little bit more, they design their workouts more, whereas younger groups might use a personal trainer, or I don't know, maybe they take the workouts from the internet and they say that it's not self-designed workout. But as far as these variables, there wasn't a whole lot of difference. So as far as their own physical activity, it seemed like these groups weren't very highly active. So average amount of cardiorespiratory type training was about 4 times per week. And then looking at resistance training, they were about 3 times a week, a little bit more than that. So they were, if you add those together, they were physically active 7 times a week. So a lot more than the general firefighter community. One study, for example, showed that about 50% of firefighters engage in physical activity less than 3 times per week. So these are definitely, as far as training, will go a lot more advanced than that. I try to do some of the physical measures and compare to the other, to a larger population of firefighters, and it seemed like weight or height was very different. The only thing where I saw a little bit of difference, so if we're looking here, these are the competitors that we measured, and there's career and volunteer firefighters. The thing that kind of, if I'm looking at these bars here, the body fat percentage just seems to be lower with the competitors. So even though their weight is similar or even a little bit higher, it seems to be it's probably more muscle mass than anything else. As far as periodization of their training, it seemed like a pretty good amount of them do periodized training. Most of it falls into more traditional linear periodization, but they seem like to be somewhat familiar with these other types of training modalities. I didn't really have a good place to put this, and I didn't want to put it on this own slide, but I thought it was interesting that almost a third of the firefighters were fitness certified. So maybe they could be a resource for the rest of the group, rest of the firefighters, to give them more information about training and be, good peer mentors as far as physical fitness goes. Repetition ranges, it seemed like they were all training at a pretty high intensity as far as strength training goes, but there's still some variability here. So one thing that would have been nice to capture is see where they're at in their periodization, because if we ask them, what's your typical workout, they might have been confused in terms of repetition ranges, because the last month they might have been working out with this intensity because they were trying to peak for the world challenge, but a couple months before that it could have been somewhere here when they were trying to build more muscle mass and muscular endurance to build the capacity for strength. So that might be a future study. As far as cardiorespiratory training, it kind of went everywhere, so they were doing a lot of different things. It seemed like they were doing high intensity work. So looking at, there's repeated sprint, high intensity interval training, and Tabata, many were using these type of modalities as well. So because that event in itself is pretty high intensity, these variables kind of point towards that they're using specific training modalities that relate to their performance needs. So as far as the findings for age, we did find that age wasn't significant, or was significantly different, or performance was significantly different between younger and older groups. And we also saw that the training stress was pretty much the same. So maybe there are some physiological factors that play into their performance as well. So there can be cardiovascular properties and neuromuscular properties that play into that performance as well. So the competitors still had a considerable weekly training volume, so people who were competing in these events, they were training a lot more. So maybe in the future, if we can get more firefighters to compete in these events, maybe that can be a motivator for them to train at a higher level than 3 times a week. From this study, we saw that about 50% trained less than 3 times per week, and that doesn't really keep them in shape for their occupation. So there's no difference in their perceived, in younger and older, perceived biomotor ability, what they thought was important. Everyone, the whole group in itself thought that the 3 highest qualities were endurance-based, and it's good that they think that, because that can be important for not only performance but also cardiovascular disease prevention, because we know that the highest cause of, or factor that causes the most amount of deaths for firefighters is cardiovascular disease. So endurance is important. So to conclude, age had a small but significant influence on simulated fireground test performance, and I have specified in highly performing firefighters. Age did not have a significant influence in training volume or stress in highly trained firefighters, and the whole cohort valued endurance capacities highly. The training habits, they were kind of everywhere in terms of volume, what they were doing, where they were in terms of periodization. We did see kind of similar emphasis being placed, maybe a little bit more on the cardiovascular training compared to resistance training. So I'd like to thank the competitors that competed, and then especially the ones who participated in the study. And you know, it was nice to get some information about firefighters and what they were doing, but really what was what I found kind of, I didn't expect to get that benefit, but getting more information about the culture of firefighters and how they're really, you know, fraternity as far as, you know, them understanding what everyone's going through, and everyone was cheering on each other. It wasn't like a huge competition in terms of not wishing some people doing well. It's like everyone wanted everyone to do really well, and you know, there were firefighters from different continents, and they were all getting along great. So it was really great to be immersed into that culture for that amount of time even. Also, the staff was really great. They fed me throughout the week. They got free food. That was a nice little perk. Driving Louisville every day. And also, what's that?
At 4 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a long week. Again, and also all the KHB students and faculty who came out to help, they drove on their own and came out to help some multiple days, and you know, I wouldn't been able to do any of this without help, because we really needed a team of researchers there to get all our measurements done, rain or cold or whatever weather it decided to be on a given day. So here's my references, and here's me before the event. I looked a little different afterwards. If you have any questions? Yes, sir.
During the competition, do you get O2 pumped into the mask?
Yeah, so it's, so the tank was for oxygen. Dr. Abel can go a little bit. So Ashley was looking at what the effects of it actually is. It doesn't necessarily provide any benefit. The tank weighs more than the actual benefit is from the oxygen. What I can tell you is, after the event, my lungs were still hurting about 30 minutes, trying to get my breath back and all that stuff. So, you know, the oxygen wasn't necessarily helpful in the event, if that's what you're going for.
Yeah, it's dry. You have to humidify it, so you do get that, you know, burning lung feeling. And you know, research has shown that just breathing through it, the positive pressure system decreases aerobic fitness or VO2 max by about 15%. So you're taking that much off the top of your capabilities. And then the weight of the gear takes an additional about 3% off. So you're at about an 18% deficit when you put gear on and you do that versus running through in PT clothes. And just a point about Ashley Lesniak's dissertation showed that running through kind of like a similar course to this, if you run through PT clothes as a baseline and then you wear gear and breathe air, you slow down by 45%. Yeah, I mean, it's dramatic. So train accordingly for gear. Look gears.
Did you, when you were talking to them about, or asking about training modalities and whatnot, did you ask them how often they train with the SCBA?
We didn't have that on the questionnaire. Just anecdotally, some people were saying they were using the training mask. If you've seen the popular training mask that people use for enhanced performance, some people were using that. Maybe in this case, it might be something that this specific population could take advantage of, because it does feel different when you have to breathe through something that's restricting your breathing, so. That's the only thing I really know about it.
And also looking at the slide that you have about cardio, I didn't see steady state training on this. No one just jogging, like, at all?
Yeah, so I didn't put that in there. I have to go look, but we did have steady state cardio in there, but I think the modality that was most prevalent was, these more high intensity training modalities. As far as them getting prepared for this competition, at least.
Didn't make sense. I expected some people were just running like a 5K every day or something.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. I just left it out from there. Just for a while, I kind of mixed slides to prepare for this one. That one I did was specifically for the firefighters that I presented in Indianapolis. So forgot I didn't put that one in there. So, Dr. Clancy.
This is sort of off the firefighter challenge, but related. What's the average age now of retirement for a career firefighter?
So I know in Finland it's 55, and they're trying to increase it to 60. And interestingly, they saw that in Finland the restriction for you to be able to smoke dive or perform, actually to be fit to perform your occupation. Otherwise, they're going to put you in physical training and things like that. You need to have a VO2 max of at least 36. And at 55 years old, when they go past that, their VO2 max in as a mean goes below that 36. So there isn't really, they shouldn't be lowering it or increasing the retirement age to 60, but I think that's what they're trying to do. I don't know, I'm not sure what it is.
Locally, it's pretty close to 50.
50?
Yeah, it's a 20-year, you gotta work for 20 years before you can get pension.
And has anybody ever looked at the occupations? Typically it's on 24, off 48, and at least the old guard, my dad's old guard, they always had a whole other job that they did. Some that were very sedentary and some that were incredibly, strenuous occupations other than their firefighting. Has that ever been examined? Like, what do they do on their off day? Not specific to, regimented training, but what do they do occupationally? Has anybody ever looked at that?
We've looked at it with the Asheville firefighters. I don't recall asking if it was a job. Anecdotally, I can tell you that a lot of carpenters, landscapers, active kind of manual labor type stuff off duty. But we did track activity levels with accelerometry on and off duty. And I'd have to go back and look at what those were and stuff to see if there was much of a difference. But if they're going to exercise, not this population, the 1%ers, but the 99%ers, it's generally going to be on duty where they have an hour allocated for wellness. What they do during that time, they could be having a smoke behind the gym. I've seen that working with Richmond there for a while. But others are engaged and participating. Some might be on a recumbent bike spinning the wheels, and the department's like, I don't care what you do as long as you're in there for an hour. But some are much more kind of proactive about the structure of it, and they have peer fitness trainers that are supposed to guide it. But as you know, Jody, it's very much a station by station culture of whether they're into fitness or whether they're not, in terms of who's kind of the captain in charge of that small group. If they're into it, most likely they'll drag the rest of them into it, and if they're not, it's a crapshoot. You're on your own.
And just looking at one of your early slides where you showed sort of that increase in the older cohort, I just wondered if that was sort of a readout. By the time you got to the older guys, the gun-ho, stay fit, stay prepared people, or stay occupationally sound to do the job. The unfit have been weeded out at
Right.
that point. And so, that inflection just got me thinking about, well, you know, is that just a matter of you have such a reduced pool, and the pool is,
What
you
you
know,
left with.
those that are actively involved in fitness enhancing?
You mean they would stop being firefighters, or they wouldn't participate in the study?
No, quit being firefighters.
Yeah, because it's kind of the issue that once firefighters get admitted to be firefighters, there's no fitness thresholds they have to upkeep. You can't fire a firefighter who's not being fit to do their occupation. I know in Finland they don't fire any firefighters for that, but they do put them in physical training, and they're still on payroll, but they can't perform their occupation-related tasks until they get their fitness level to a certain level. What I also know is there's very little cardiovascular disease in that population. So
And you also see sort of the older guys move, even if they're not quote unquote administration or whatever, even if they're called to the fires, they end up doing quote unquote the more running the pumps or
Right.
something, like they don't go into the fires, you know.
Yeah, they kind of find ways to work around that a little bit, don't they? You know, it's probably for the best.
Yeah, just at my master's program, we worked a lot with our firefighters, and they had to maintain either a certain BMI or body fat percentage, and they could choose which one they wanted. And if they didn't meet the BMI, they could get their body fat tested, but if they didn't meet that, they got written up. Did you and they were very unwilling, they did not come into our university to get tested. Did you find a lot of, I guess, pushback or anything similar to that with this population, like the competitors or anything?
well, mainly the pushback was from them focusing on their events. They weren't really that conscious about their getting their physical measurements done. It was more like, I'm not here for that. So that's why we had a smaller sample size for that, but not they weren't really. I don't think, at least, they weren't saying to me that they were conscious about their physique.
Becca, were they required to do a physical ability test
They
as well?
were.
They were,
Yeah.
because I would say, who cares about the body count as long as you can do the job? You can be as fat as you want, but hey, you might have a lot of muscle, and you know what I mean?
Well, and
Or-
that's why a lot of them opted to do body fat
Yeah.
instead of BMI, but still, the ones that came to us, were not fit. And so they were just angry the whole time, and so I didn't know if that was a common thing
I haven't seen
in
that.
organizations or not.
I've never seen that part of it, but it's not, as Ansi said, in the United States, there's no federal standard for occupational physical ability, but it's a municipality by municipality decision in the department trying to work with the union, which is usually the roadblock in implementing a physical ability standard. But I think most of us in here would agree that every department should have some standard, but the unions don't always see it that way. Some are supportive, and those are the places that have it, but some are not.
You mentioned the Air Force Base really near Champaign, and there were base closed down several years ago, but they had firefighters that were a part of the military, and of course they had to meet the military standards or they could be thrown into the retirement program. And so we had a number come over because it was a military evaluation of neck circumference, and so we had this barrage of people that were coming in to get underwater weight and all this because they were up against losing their retirement benefits if they didn't
It's a motivator.
stay with it. Yeah.
Motivator.
Yeah,
Honestly, if you want to get into the effects of age, all these results are online, and they're broken down by age groups, and open, over 40, over 45, over 50. So you can actually go into the data sets in this public record and look at the effects of age that way, pulling out the means. But more interesting to our current conversation, what was your finish time?
my finish time. That was 2 minutes and 38 seconds.
So you're about 214th. Good work.
Out of how many? Out of how many?
Oh, man. I wasn't
Yeah,
gonna
there's
say
over a million firefighters.
Was that at that competition, Lance, or was
Yeah,
that?
yeah, so, in this particular competition, 264. So in the open, men, women, all ages.
It's probably the 20th percentile.
Yeah, for the first time during the course though, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a world stage, that's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely when people get to run it more and more, we try to look at if the experience had any effect, but because, you know, things were so variable that we weren't able to play that, make that, there wasn't any significant influence. But for sure, if you get to run it, some of these, like the Canadian firefighters, they're competing first in this, I think it's first in the States. There's like their competitions, and then when they're done with that, they go to Canada and do the same thing, so they're competing a lot throughout the year.
Do they also fight fires?
Every 3 days.
Exciting.
In fairness, I think you lost about 4 seconds when you dropped the hose and it was spraying everyone.
I thought it was spring roll, right? Maybe it was on purpose.
And Haley, the guy on the right there, the former champion from Mankato, he was in a number of Bob's studies when Bob was at Mankato State, Dr. Pettit there, so it's really kind of fun.
Critical speed stuff?
Yeah, I think with load carriage, they did some loaded study, and I think he was in that, so it was just a small world. Okay, thank you very much.